Then we can look in your practical exercise, and what we need to do is to implement properly required classes in GTM.activity03 package. And what do we have here? We have 3 classes which should be implemented, and my recommendation is to start with easiest ones and then continue with more complicated ones. And the easiest one to start with probably is randomperson.java class, where you need to learn how to use code generation for your particular IDE. And any normal IDE has some code generation features. And in Eclipse you need to create private data structures. What means private in details I will explain later, which can store following values. And your task here is to be as much efficient as possible when you convert system requirements from some kind of plain English, hopefully it's plain, not legalese English, to the Java code. And here we have a list of these variables or data structures described, but we need to create Java code out of it. And to be as efficient as possible, in this particular case, so-called block cursor helps a lot, which in standard Eclipse you get with Alt-Shift-A. In Linux and in Windows I think it was Ctrl-Shift-A, something like this. Because here are so many similarities in these data structures, and unfortunately to us here this description do not follow rules of Java syntax, because in Java syntax type should be before name of these variables of these data structures, and we need to reorganize them. But if we create nice columns here and we shift it to block cursor mode, we can do reorganize them quite simply. We remove unneeded ones and then we can auto format it with Ctrl-Shift-F. And now we have completed first to do here. We have not completed. This data structure should be private. And then we need to create so-called accessors or getters and setters, which are public. So we go to source, generate getters and setters, select all, and generate. I generate them in bad place. After last member, somewhere here. So unfortunately for Eclipse, this code generator ignores comments, so you still may need to reformat your code a little bit to make it nicer. And that would be one of typical Java classes with private data structures for these objects. So these do not have static keywords, these variables. These are inside body of the class, so all these variables are templates for an object when you will create ones. And then accessors for them. In more modern Java, this class actually could be a record. And then for record we should not be required to generate such methods because it is quite a lot of boilerplate code. But Java is verbose programming language, so later you will see why it is beneficial to make these data structures private, that these are not accessible directly, and you have getters and setters here instead, because you may need to add different kind of controls when you get or set these values. And when you think that you are done, you go to the test part of this project and run this JUnit test, and I hope that this one is done. So that's about some code generation features in IDEs. Next exercise is, which is also not too hard, is about shortcut for block cursor is Alt Shift and A. So here you need to get more understanding about main method of Java and passed arguments here. So if you know Java syntax well, you should know that this is starting point for Java application, and it takes array of strings as arguments. So that means string if you ignore long list of methods for string operations, but for data handling and data storing, string is an array of bytes. But here we have array of strings, so this means we have array of arrays in passed here. And this array of string is used to pass additional information when program is started. First thing what we can do here for debugging purposes is just to say print this out. And in Eclipse, when you need to pass parameters, there are so-called run configurations, and you can always create run configuration from scratch by yourself, but I do not recommend to do this. What I recommend is to first run it, to create default run configuration, and when you have created default run configuration by running it just as is, then you can modify it. And if you want to pass arguments here, you, for example, write them apply and run, and it will print out these words here. That's how it looks inside Eclipse, but usually what you are interested about is to do it in command line, because, for example, you add this additional parameter for commands, you do this in command line. And to run it in command line, you need to know how to run it properly. Of course, you will always start with Java. Then you say that class path is target and classes for Maven projects. And then class is called GPM 03 RY. And here I do not know about your environment. My environment is a little bit broken. If we use latest and greatest version of Eclipse, default setting for it is to use latest and greatest version of Java, which is not Java 11, but something else. And here, similarly to Android, it shows API version, not actual Java version, but you see that this number is bigger than that number. So when I use and compile it inside Eclipse, it is actually using more modern Java version than I'm using outside Eclipse. And what can we do? Somewhere in preferences, for compiler preference we see that the default setting for this Eclipse is to compile a project for Java 15. In theory, it shouldn't happen, because if you look on this project in pom.xml file, there is entry in pom.xml which says that we should compile this Maven project for Java release 11. But Eclipse ignores this particular setting, and you may Google it by yourself how to deal with this, but that's how it looks in practice, that if you say something like mvn compile, let's say clean before, if we compile this project using Maven directly, it works, because now it uses this setting here to compile it for Java 11, what I'm using on my computer currently. But for Eclipse, this setting is ignored. It's not big surprise, because in general you see that entry says here that this setting is for Maven compiler plugin, not for Eclipse. And for example, if you are curious, you can check, for example, and maybe you will find out, particularly for Eclipse. And if you see Org Apache Maven plugin, and you see that this entry for this project setting is ignored by Eclipse. And this is how practice is different from theory. Probably you know this saying that in theory and practice should be the same, but in practice it is different. So what can we do about it? we change these global preferences for Eclipse and say that instead of Java 15 we will be using Java 11 for entire workspace. And now let's recompile it using Eclipse, not Maven. And now hopefully it will work now. And now it works. So here I just printed all these passed arguments, and you see that what I have passed here as additional words after I invoked Java Virtual Machine, and these parameters were consumed by Java Virtual Machine to load and execute main method of this class, and these are passed arguments. By default they are delimited by space and maybe tabs and other so-called white spaces, but if you need to pass arguments as a different strings where spaces are included, then you wrap them up either in quotes or in double quotes. So you see that now only 2 arguments are passed to it, 1 space 2 and 3 space 4. So that's what we need to deal about. Additional information is passed to this class. It is put into this array of strings, and then we need to deal with them. How do we need to deal with them? We need to store these passed values into an integer array of integers, and that would be something like array is args in business terms, but of course Java is a strongly typed language, and you cannot just assign values from array of strings into array of integers, because even though you just pass numbers here as arguments, string containing number is completely different data type or animal than actual number, because actual number is, for example, if it's primitive type, is just 4 bytes for integer, for example 1, but for string containing 1, first it is object, it has this reference part, then reference points to the string object which says I'm string, and my value is reference to an array. I have to write it more properly. So it is string, inside string there is a reference to other thing, and this reference refers to array with bytes, and length, let's say, is 4, and value is 1, 2, 3, 4. And of course this data structure and this data structure is completely different, because here we have object inside object, like array of bytes inside string, which has value 1, 2, 3, 4, and okay, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 also here. And what we need to take only this part out of all these data structures and write value to that part. That's our task here. So, therefore, what we need here is, first, this array is declared, but not initialized. And if we will try to do something with array, let's say array, some cell is, let's say, 1, just for testing purposes, we will get null pointer exception because this array is declared but not initialized. So we need to say something like array is null int, but we need to know what is size here. And of course size is the same size as number of, or size of this array here. We need to hold so many integers here as we have numbers passed here as arguments to this command. So it means length size, what is property for it? Length. Something is missing here. So we have done that part, and then we need to convert data because we need some iterator here, and I will use C-like approach because every time I need index or number of these cells. This C-like approach is still pretty good. Smaller than. And here you can refer either to this size or that size, it will be the same. Probably more intuitive in this particular cases. Array length property. And we need to convert data. So array this cell of E should be args cell E, but here we will get string, and we need to convert from string containing numbers to actual number. And here we have hint, we use integer parse int method. And verbose and formal way to do this would be also writing block delimiters with these brackets here, but if you have just single line for this loop, you are not required to write one, and if I'm not required to write one, I do not write one. So that's it, I think, about this. Then we need to... it's not it. So... and then we need to sort elements in this array. How can we sort? We can use arrays class and sort method to it. Something like this, and now I think it is done, so I will remove this debugging code here because we can print it out. Here, actually, what I removed there, it should actually be in different place. I need to move that from there. Or not targets, but RI. And every time you have completed to-dos, you should remove these to-do keywords. And here you need to return reference to this array. And if you are brave, you can start immediately testing it by automated test. And it all looks like this part is also done. And now biggest challenge for this package is to implement properly Black Knight class, where mine focus is for you to understand difference between local and these member variables and static variables. Unfortunately, if you are absolute beginner, we have not talked in detailed way about constructors explicitly. And constructor is method how you construct your customized object or built-in object in Java. To use this class as a template for object and methods of this class to do something with these objects. And here, depending on our speed, maybe we will not complete it completely till to the lunchtime, because before lunchtime we will also have first theoretical knowledge check, then we will leave it for afternoon session if we will not complete it. Of course, I could just write code here and show you, but it's not the point. Point is to explain what you need to understand here. And probably if you just want to get everything done as quick as possible, then easiest way to do this is if these practical exercises have also video recorded for this practical exercise, you can just go through these already prepared videos and probably you will be just fine. So, about business here. Business here is much more complicated than for previous classes, because we need to implement class which simulates Black Knight from Monty Python sketch, where you can get reference here. And so what is this simulation here? Remember that there is overlap between animation and simulation, and overlap between simulation and management. For example, if you have some phenomena like Black Knight in this case, And there are some real world Black Knights, even if these are imaginative, and we can simulate them. We create, for example, this Black Knight class with behavior, where this behavior corresponds or reflects what is actually happening in real life, and here in computer. And that is simulation. And if this simulation is very proper, one-to-one relationship with real life, then we can actually say that it is management. All this automated management of information systems, like for student database, for buying, selling things, etc., it simulates real world. But if this simulation is good, then everything we see into this simulated area, like in web store or whatever, actually reflects properly real life. And if you see here in web store that something is shipped to you, then this means something was really shipped to you in real life. So proper simulation is management. And then there is animation, which just shows nice pictures on the screen. And this animation may be part of simulation, but maybe just an animation. For example, if you use movies, it is animation, but movie is not a simulation at all in most of cases. And therefore, because here we do quite a proper simulation, you can look on these implementations of class in two different ways. Either simulation of behavior of Black Knight, or actually management of these Black Knights inside your management system. And as it was told here, first, if you want just to understand how it works, you can just print out when these methods are called. And if you are using QWERTY keyboard layout, it may look like very much time to do, much work to do, but never afraid to do mechanical work here, because for mechanical work you don't need to think so much, and it is always predictable how much time you will spend to do just mechanical work. For example, I can do this mechanical work, let's say, in 1/2 of a minute. But if you start thinking about this, etc., you never know how much time it will take. So therefore, never afraid of some mechanical work for debugging purposes. It looks that it will take a lot of time initially, but you always will get back some benefits for them, because it is not wasted time. And you'll see that JUnit tests works in following ways. First, they call setBattle method, then it calls a constructor for these Black Knight objects, setting different names for them, and then it breaks, and you can copy paste here from file trace. You can move this tab around, like somewhere here, but when I worked in automated testing, I didn't like it because every time something is printed out in console, in this group of windows, console is last active window or view in Eclipse. For example, you run it and then this JUnit is not active. And to rerun JUnit test, you need another click to activate this tab to rerun. But if you have it in separate group here, you see something printed in console and you can rerun it just by single click. And when you work in repetitive tasks like testing, every click counts. So, somebody wants to ask something? So, but drawback here is that you can't see file or trace completely. You need to scroll it forward and backward, but Eclipse allows you to copy it in another console view here, which is usually bigger. And you see, for example, that wrong initial number of total nights because nothing is implemented. And if you do things like this, then remember to clean up all your console outputs, that sooner or later everything here is clean and white. Or dark if you use dark mode for Eclipse or whatever. So, first thing we need to do is to implement this setButton method, which was called first. First, what it says, we need to initialize array of nights with passed size. Array of nights is already declared for us, so design is given, but implementation is not given. So similarly to previous thing, we need to say nights is null, but of course it's not array of integers, it's array of block night objects. And size for it should be initial number. Then we need to reset total numbers of total and I and dead nights to 0. So these are all these static structures of how many different kind of nights we have for each particular simulation. Total nights initially is 0, alive nights is initially 0, and then dead nights is initially 0. I think that's all. Total, alive, dead. If we rerun JUnit test, now we should see different error. Not yet. I think this part is done. I think no problem hides somewhere else. And problem I think hides here in construction of block night. So if we look here how it works, setButton is called and then these methods block night, where we construct different block night objects. And what we need to say here, first we need to set proper count of his arms, legs and heads. So set name, first is name is name. We could do something like this, but here we have a problem, because now we say that passed argument here is reassigned to its value, but we want to refer to this template of an object to assign name from passed argument here. Something like this. We can create our main method for testing purposes. Block night. So we construct this object, and we have passed argument Jānis to it as a string, and we want to put it inside this holder to hold name of this particular block knight. But if we refer it in such way, then we refer to this passed argument to constructor. What can we do? We can do following. What does some stupid source code generators? They just add identifier like ID, name1, to this passed argument, and we have solved this. If we run it again, we see that name1 refers to passed argument to constructor here, but we assign it to internal field of block knight object. But this is stupid thing to do. It's allowed for generated code, not for you, because you should know that there is this keyword which refers to current object. And when you add it, you see that this name now is brown. It refers to passed argument, and this name refers to field of an object. And when we run it, it works as expected. So name is passed argument to this constructor method, but this dot name refers to current object, this block knight, which is currently constructed, and we assign this name to object, name passed argument to name of object. So then we could similarly write this alive is true, because booleans by default is false. Then what else we need to initialize properly? Arms, legs, head. And you can add this dot here if you like it, but I tend to make code as short as possible, and my requirements for beauty is not that everything here should be in the same pattern like this. If your requirements for beauty are following more code, you can leave it. I write this only when I have to write, for example, to distinguish between name of passed argument for method and name of field of an object declared here. Then we need to increase total number of alive knights. So total knights is bigger now. What is missing here is this command. We need to put reference of this current object into free cell of array of these black knights. So we need to do something like this. Black knight some cell is something. What is current knight? Current knight we can always refer to using this keyword. And so here I think it should work if it's total knights, because initially it's 0. And also we need to check that this knight is currently alive. We need also to increase number of alive knights. And with that I think it's not tested by this constructor, may be implemented. And you see that test still fails, but test fails with different error. And when you work in testing, different errors are called progress. Because now we have different error, compression failure, wrong response for cut-off arm. And every time in Eclipse when you see compression failure, you can double click on this failure trace and small compression editor opens which shows expected string and actual string. And why this error happens? Because cut-off arm of course is not implemented. So what we need to do here, so I think this to do also maybe removed. So if not alive, so here we use this boolean operation negation because alive is boolean, but we need to return this if it's dead, and so this means if not alive, this means dead, we return this string. Then you can write else if, but I do not recommend it because every time you call separate method and you return, you can use this pattern so-called early return. So instead of else if, and you check for example arms, some arms is in mathematical, in Java perspective, has some arms means number of arms is larger than 0. We need to do more. Of course we need to simulate cutting off this arm. This means number of arms should be decreased by 1, and we write it as a decrement because it works faster than arms is arms minus 1. Because here you have two things to remember. And even, because it's byte, we need to typecast it. Okay, it's just ugly, and maybe then we don't need to cast it here. But because Java is strongly typed language, and this value, literal value 1 here is I think integer by default. But if you write it as a decrement, it is nice and short. And else return, and you can write else. But because you return from method, you will continue execution of this code only if this statement will be false and this statement, this condition will be false and this statement will not be executed. And therefore, instead of else if, we can just write if. And here again, if this statement will be true, you will return execution from the method. So this else is not required. You just write in the following way. And now we still have completion failure, but you see that this now is in different place. It is wrong response for cut off leg. And that means that probably this method is working correctly, and because these two methods are similar, I will mostly copy paste this code and then I will just update it. So this is the same. Here we need to return a bit different string. And of course not about arms but legs and legs. And maybe that will do it. And now we see that we have wrong response for cut of head, but that I will leave for afternoon session because otherwise we will run out of time for knowledge check. Do you have some short questions or comments for now? If no, then I will prepare for your next knowledge check. And knowledge check will start at 12:30, but 5 minutes before 12:30 I will explain you how exactly this knowledge check will be performed. Therefore, let's say that knowledge check will be at 12:25. So I will not share screen for now to prepare for it, and at 12:25 I will start showing you how exactly these knowledge checks will be prepared. And then we will go to the next exercise. As far as I remember, everything, at least how it looked like, was working except this last method for cut of head. And similarly, maybe not here, we can first do this. Then we say we could just have minus minus, but and it may work, but it is not good thing because then if it will be called several times in some conditions, maybe happen that number of heads become negative, and then of course your simulation or management will not fully reflect real life. And therefore we will do with conditions that we decrease numbers of heads only if there is something to decrease. And then here we have some duplicate or redundant, because in general we could say that we can check status dead or alive only by number of heads or alive, but and of course if you are bureaucratic you could do something like this, but it will work in the same way, because here I care only about numeric values, that number of heads do not decrease. So if it's not alive, it will continue, and Probably this will work. I may need to add these brackets here, but maybe it's not required. And then we need to return we need to update number of total alive and dead nights. So alive is not this variable. How this is total alive nights and dead nights. It should be decreased. Dead nights should be increased. And then we need to return a message like this. Or like this. And here we need to iterate through array of these all nights, and if some of them are alive, these should be mentioned that these will still fight. So we can do something like this for, and here I will use this iterator approach, or like for scripting languages, not for C. For black night through all the nights, and if current night something is alive, then we need to add it to the list. And then we need something like this. And here, let's say first this list empty. Okay, I will write Solving comparison. Something is not right. Something like this. So if this list is not empty, return this message, either return that message. And as usual, I write this code with precision to about something. Something will not be right, but we will test it out. First thing what we need to add delimiters between names. And then we have a problem that after last we don't need this one. We can do it something like this. I don't don't know precise syntax. Maybe this will work. Index is starting from 0. And it even works. And now when it works, we can think a little bit about optimization. I think there's not much to optimize for these methods. This method looks quite long. But we will leave it following. And here now you should pay attention here that here I am shamelessly using reassignment to the string and concatenation. And you should remember that if this list is very long, then here I would have the same problem as I showed you in this theoretical part of the topic, that in most of times what will happen is you have to copy previous value to the new place, which is a little bit longer, to the next value, just to add some value here at the end. And so in more serious cases, when this list is very long, you should use this string builder object. But my recommendation is following. You always start with shameless string concatenation and replacement, because strings are efficient for data storage perspective, and then if you have some issues, then you can refactor it, rewrite to string buffer operations, because remember, string buffer takes I think 4 kilobytes of memory. Let's look for the latest stable version, Java 11, not Java 7. I don't know exactly, but it was few kilobytes at least. And for small examples, few kilobytes of reserved memory of course is overkill, and therefore you can always start with string operations, and every time you change string you need to reassign it. And when it doesn't work properly, then you should remember about string buffer and do it in most faster way. Some of computer scientists, I think Donald Knuth or somebody, told that root of evil for programming is premature optimization. So you don't need to optimize before you actually need to optimize it. So, do you have any questions or comments on this?